Yup, get a chunk here.
Hello there my fellow witches and warlock, and welcome back to another sewing vlog. It's been a long while since I've done any costume project for myself, since the past couple videos were all for commissions, but I'm here today with another Cardcaptor Sakura costume project. I'll be making Sakura's water lily costume from the Clear arc and one of my favorite outfits of the anime version. As my usual, I had the outfit broken down into pieces and I'm starting with the main dress. For the dress, I draped and made a mock-up of the top bodice. Then I drew out the shape for the bottom skirt portion. And here we have mock-up number 1. The skirt portion, or at least the bottom, didn't turn out how exactly I envisioned. I think it's because I curved out the side too much, so it's doing that weird, curvy, so it looks more like a witch hat in a way. But I think maybe if I straighten out the hem a bit, it might fix it and it will look more circular than the way it is now. So I'll go ahead and fix that.
A few moments later.
Hey, so actually fixing the bottom hem actually did the trick. So I just straightened it out a bit more because originally it was actually super curvy on the side, so both sides was just zoop. But after taking off probably about 6 inches of it, it's more circular now instead of an oval shape, which caused it to flare out and I just look like an egg or a saucer. But this is the initial shape I originally wanted, so I think I'm gonna stick with that. With the success of the mock-up, I finalized all the pieces onto paper as my official final pattern. For the water lily flower, I free-handed and drew out the template, which I'll be using to make an applique with in order to satin stitch them onto the outfit. So I transferred all the original mock-up pieces after I took it apart onto the final paper, which is my final pattern. I'll be using this to make the final dress on the actual fabric. So I'll go ahead and do that next. And while I'm at it, I already had the lily pad and the lily flower itself already made. I basically just freehand it since I didn't really feel like pulling out my Cricut machine this time. But yeah, here's our shapes. So there's actually different styles of it, because especially on the main dress, there's like the big one, and then there's the lily pad, and then there's the 3-petal one. I had to scale it correctly to the dress so it actually fits. But for this, I'm gonna do applique and satin stitching. So go ahead and do that and see how it looks on the next one. I then cut out all the fabrics for the dress. The dress consists of an outer fabric, flat lining, and inside lining. So a whole nother chunk of layering. So I got all the pieces cut over here, including both the fabric, the interlining, and the lining all ready to go. I've already went on ahead and sewed down some of the parts like the darts and the front bodice, but I can't put everything together until I put on the applique, which is the part I'll be doing next. But anyways, I got the template ready here, so I'll start to go ahead and basically cut out the pink and the green part for the lily pad and the lily flower itself. I also got some carbon tracing paper, which is what I'll be using to draw on basically the lines and the guidelines in order for me to satin stitch on the minor details onto the lilies and the pads itself. So I'll go ahead and do that next. The charcoal transfer paper works really well at transferring the designs onto the fabric. However, it does leave residue if you press too hard on the area that isn't meant for the design template. But it does come off with water though. After applying it onto the bottom portion of the dress, I satin stitched this piece of a beast on with the zigzag stitch. I had to apply all the flowers and lily pads onto the dress before I can sew everything together and start layering. The bottom piece of the skirt has an opening inside to a channel which I made in order to insert the boning in after. I won't be getting into it way later near the end, but I ended up not going with the boning after all, but I just wanted to show you my full progress of a before and after and how it all became this. I'm adding on the red bias tape here, but it also got omitted later, which I will explain, but I just wanted to share you what it previously looked like before I changed it to the red trim. Then I inserted the boning through the inside of the channel with the opening I made. Well friends, it's been a month and I'm finally touching this project again. For you guys, it's probably been a split second. But anywho, I actually did a lot to it. So the reason behind the butterflies here is because I had a little incident with some fabric rubbing. The fabric rubbed off and I couldn't get rid of the mark without actually ruining the fabric. And that fabric was caused by the red fabric I bought. I thought of just embellishing it a bit. It's not accurate, but I think it looks nice either way. It works with it. I found some butterflies online that fits perfectly. The color scheme even matches. And then I decided to get rid of the red fabric that I was using before as the bias trim and just went with actual regular trim. With that, I completed the dress. Next up are the pants, which I really don't like wearing, but you know, it's for cosplay. I'll be using this commercial pattern here as my base and make modification to it. I trace the pattern onto paper as I make alterations to the silhouette that I want. And all the pieces of fabrics were cut out the same way as I did for the dress, and it was onto some mass sewing. For the red trim, I hand sewed each of the loop on individually on both top and bottom because suffering is the secret ingredient to the magic here. The pants has an opening side with a zipper. Before sewing it on, I base stitched it on by hand in order to keep it in place as I machine sew it on after. Pinning it down works totally fine, but I like the seams to line up and match, so base stitching is my to-go method and you can remove it right after with the seam ripper. For the tassel decoration, I made dainty bows out of some satin bias tape that I already had and sewed on glass bead and then attached it to the tassel. Then they were sewn down onto the cuffs of the pants.
One eternity later.
With that, the pants is now complete. There is also another water lily flower on the left side of the pants which I sewn on before putting the pants together. For the shoes, I found a pair online that was just the perfect color to match. With that as my base, I made modification by painting onto it. Using a white primer, I sprayed the bottom to completely cover the sole. Next up is painting the bottom and the side. This takes a few coverage in order to cover it completely, so it's mostly just patient as I cover it layer by layer. You don't usually want to rush a paint job. Then it was onto painting the flowers and smaller details onto the toes. You know, this really looks like when I'm trying to fix my eyeliner, it just gets thicker and thicker, and before that it just reaches like 20 feet of your faces. Alright, so I just finished painting on the water lily flower onto the shoe. I'm just waiting for the black outline to dry a bit. Not my greatest because I'm really bad at painting actually. My hands aren't really that steady when I'm holding a paintbrush. So after that, I'm gonna be putting on the red design and trim around the shoe because that's what she also has around her little opening right here. Here. And similar to basically the pants and the hem of the dress that I did before. I sealed the paint part with clear nail polish as a protective coating. Then I modified the strap part with trims and embellishments.
Later.
And the shoes are now all finished, so after I finished painting the shoes, I did a protective layer of spray on the bottom, and then for the edges right here and even the flowers right here, I finished it off with the clear nail polish, because since I'm using acrylic paint on the rubber sole right here, they actually do chip off, which it happened during my painting process. So I sealed it with nail polish and actually stayed on, and even using the nail polish right here on the paint so nothing scratches off, and it's nice and semi-gloss, which I like. And after that, I added on the red trim for the red part of her shoe right there. It's half sewn on, and then some part I had to use glue because it was actually pretty thick to sew around, and I embellished it a little bit by making little flowers just to add on a little accent, which makes it cute. At least I think so. I like it. And yeah, so 2 on each side of the strap. And the last thing I did was the shoes originally came with these buckles, and I took them off and I replaced it and made it snaps instead. So now the shoes are just removable by snap instead. Because originally, because I added on the trim, the straps would not fit through these buckles, so I had to take them off regardless. But yeah, now they are all done, and I really like them actually. Alright, so we're actually almost done with this whole entire costume. All I have left to do is the jacket and the hair ornament, but since I'm moving soon, I really don't feel like digging out more stuff to drape up and mock up the pattern like I usually do, so I'm just gonna do a pre-made pattern and basically modify it from there on, and yeah, let's go do that. With this base, I traced the pattern onto paper and modified the silhouette and shape to create a new pattern for Sakura's jacket. I'm going to create a quick mock-up for it just in case to make sure everything is how I want it to be. So now that I'm good with this mock-up here, I'm gonna take it apart completely, which is why I base stitched it in order to take it apart without basically tearing into it. Makes it easier, and use that to finalize the initial first pattern that I used. So I'm basically finalizing the measurements and where I want everything to be with that mock-up, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut everything out. Taking the mock-up apart, I finalized my paper pattern. So I just cut out all the pieces to the jacket. It was actually a lot to it because I have to cut both the lining and the underlining, and I still have a couple parts of interfacing to do. So because the fabric I'm using is like a quilted cotton from Joann's, they're very lightweight and they're almost see-through. So for both the red, which is the lining, and the yellow, which is the outer fabric for the jacket. So for each of those, I've cut out another cotton for the underlining so that they both have a good weight to them and they won't be flimsy, because I don't really like them being wrinkly when they're lightweight. I don't remember why I went with this fabric. I think at the time when I went to buy it, it was the only thing available, because at the time fabrics were really low because people were using it and buying it out to make masks. So luckily the fabric I needed, the colors I need, were exactly this for Sakura, and the blue I already had at home, which was linen. But anyways, yeah, I cut out each of the pieces out, so I'm just gonna go ahead and sew it to keep all the underlining piece to the actual fabric, and then I'm gonna go ahead and start sewing it together. But before that, I need to do some satin stitching for one of the sleeve, because one of the sleeve has the little water lily flower, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I then sew the flat lining onto the outer and lining part of the fabric. The yellow is my outer fabric and my red is the inner lining part. Luckily, this white part's right here is just the underlining to the red lining here, but as I mentioned before, what happened to my other dress, the red part bled into the fabric because of the hot steam, so this is what happened now. But this is fine for this because this is just the underlining for the lining. So hopefully after doubling the lining with the white, and along with another layer of white right here, it'll prevent the red from bleeding onto the yellow, which means if I ever do wash it, cold water it is, because hot water is gonna make the red dye come out. Here I have all the pieces lined and ready to be assembled together. So we have quite the color palette over here, but most of everything is sewn on and flatlined, so ready to actually start putting the sleeves together. So over here we have the blue, which is the lining part for the sleeve, because only the inside of the sleeve is blue here. So I'm gonna go ahead and just do the sleeve blue for the inside lining. And we have the outer one here with the satin stitching on one arm, and the rest of the piece for the jacket, the front and the back. I finished adding on my little tag as well. But yeah, I'm gonna start doing the sleeves after I do the collar, gather up the sleeves a little bit just to fit it onto the sleeve cap and the armhole. And then after that, I just need to do a little hand sewing of the trim and embellishment, and that would be it for the jacket. And then I need to work on a couple more accessory that goes basically on top of it, but I'll work on that after. For the upper collar of the jacket, I hand stitched the inside of the collar. The front closure will be hook and eye. This took a while since there was about 20 pieces total. I also had to make sure they all lined up correctly as I sew them. So all these trim here that I put on with these clips are all gonna get hand sewn together, so that's going to take a couple centuries, but we'll go ahead and do that. And you're probably asking me, why don't I just machine sew it? It's because I don't like the way the stitches look on these trim, especially because of the texture and rigid. When I sew them with machine, it just, unless I sew them in the center, it doesn't look good, and I don't want to just sew it on the center because then the sides will pop up. So for these kind of trims, I've always been hand sewing them for the longest time. They do take a while, but I kind of like it that way more. So, you know, more pain and suffering, but it's okay. It's worth it, I hope. Yeah, this would have taken the full day to complete if I was working on it consistently, but it ended up taking a few days.
2,000 years later.
So it's been a few days, but I'm finally done with the jacket. The hand sewing on the trim is what took the longest because I had to catch every single one of these loops on both sides. So after I'm done with one side, I did the other, so that was a lot. I'm also finished with the sleeve part where I added on all the dainty little accessories. And then here's the other side where you get the flowers. Now that's all done. All I have left is the accessory, which is there's two pieces of the lily flower left, which is one on the front chest right here and another one for the head. So I'll go ahead and work on those and I should be completed with the entire outfit. For the accessories, I made a new template because the sizing was a little different from the ones I made previously for the lily flower. So I redrew and everything, and for this one I want it to be a little thicker so it actually stays on like almost like a brooch. So what I did was I basically took like a thick inner facing piece right here and I sandwiched it between with the fabric with the really light applique of heat and bond, and after that I basically just did more satin stitching around it. This is the back side and this is the front, so I sandwiched it between the two fabrics. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do next is basically just cut it out carefully. Hopefully I don't unravel any of the satin stitching. After cutting it out, I painted the edges for full coverage since you can still see some of the pink part of the fabric after cutting it. And it is done. It actually came out pretty nice after. So what I did was I basically just burned the edge around a bit with a lighter. That gets it really crispy on the edge because the facing is still synthetic. So it burned and it shriveled in, and then after that kept it nice and smooth. I just paint over it with acrylic paint to darken it, and yeah, I'll probably do two tiny snaps right here and maybe here, and that'll be it for this. And I just need to make one more for the head. So in my last minute decision, I decided to actually remove the original plastic boning I had on the hemline after all, because after looking at it carefully, as much as I wanted to achieve how the silhouette looks from the anime, it just doesn't look good in real life. I'm very glad that I decided to make the channel removable, so there's like a small little slit inside underneath that I can just pull up the boning whenever I want to. And if I ever do feel like changing it up, like maybe like adding wires or something, I can stick it back in. So there's always that option. With that as my final part, I finished the costume with the last water lily for the headpiece, and everything is now finished. And here's to another Sakura costume added to my collection. I started on this project late last summer of 2020 and took a break from it for a while, but since I'm moving soon, I thought I wrapped up all my unfinished project I have left. I adore this outfit so much and it was a lot of fun to make. To be honest, I never had any plans on making this one since I was skeptical of how the silhouette would look on me, but I'm happy that I did. I always wanted to make one of her Chinese-inspired theme ones since she has quite a variety of those. I definitely have more Cardcaptor Sakura and Clan project plan coming up, so I hope you'll check those out too when I do. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you'll all continue to support me on my stitch crafting journey. Please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more and what else I'll be brewing here in the future. Thank you all again, and I'll see you all in my next video.